Oh, man. Made it in. All right. Hey, Abdul. Greetings. Howdy, folks. Let's put up an announcement on Twitter as well while we're up to this for a second. All right. Thanks, DM, for working on that. I know that was not straightforward. And folks, it is with great joy that I welcome you back to the viewer rapid tournaments of the weekends. We are going to, I think, normally have Saturday as our day for this. We'll see. Still, let's say the schedule is still a little bit tentative. I tried to work it out, but there may be some issues with it. We're going to try to make it Saturdays, and we're going to use that slot for a mix of events. Sometimes a normal viewer rapid tournament. Other times it's going to be a sparring tournament. You know, our end game sparring or middle game sparring or opening sparring from the training program. So people will be able to check those tasks off their lists. And also, we're going to work on using those events as kind of tests of how you're doing on your end game, middle game, or opening, and put them into a sort of dashboard of what your strengths and weaknesses are, assessing, you know, your opening rating, your middle game rating, your end game rating, your tactics rating, your strategic rating, and sort of breaking that all down for people in the program so they know what to focus on for maximum returns on their time and effort. Now, let's see. I've got a chessboard up. Good. The event's open to all. Clear. Exclam play if you want to play. Should do it. Yes. Let's take that and see if we can go post that information on the YouTube channel for folks. Looks like our YouTube stream might not be live right now. Let's just double check though. Oh, it looks like we were able to connect for 30 seconds. And then it didn't work. Okay. Yeah, chess games are rated. I mean, they're only rated online. It won't affect your FIDE rating to play a rapid game online. It'll affect your online rapid rating, though, when you play an online rapid game. All right, and so those three sections, folks, you see the ratings on them. People sometimes ask, are those FIDE ratings, chess.com ratings, adjusted program ratings? Those are chess.com ratings because the tournament is on chess.com. So if you're over 1700, click the third link for Arena 3618429. You know, if you're under 1300, click the first link for Arena 3618433, etc. And the arenas are starting in like, I think 6 minutes, mostly. I put them to start like 5 minutes after the hour, just to give folks a moment to find the events and get into them. But normally we'll be trying to start exactly on the hour, you know, with like the pre-show 15 minutes before. So I think in general, I'm going to start the tournaments exactly at 9 a.m. on future weeks. It looks like a lot of people found their way into the under 1300 arena, so that is excellent. Wonderful. Good to see you guys in there. So as people join the tournaments, a couple words on how this works. Basically, you're going to be playing against each other. The chess.com system or algorithm is going to pair you against people whose ratings are pretty close to yours. It's a 3-hour. This tournament today is an arena, so it's a 3-hour tournament. You can play however many games you want or don't want. It's not a certain set of rounds that are paired. So you join, you play a game or two. Whenever you want to stop, you hit pause. If you want to come back, you can, rejoin, and it will give you more games. So you play kind of at your pace, and you don't wait around for other games to finish. The way we normally used to do it with like 4 rounds. All the games would play at once, and then everyone would play round 2 together. What else? While you play your games, it's good to mute the stream and focus on the game you're playing. Does that make sense? You don't want to listen to me talking about your game while you play your game. It's confusing. It's not what it really feels like to play chess. You don't normally have somebody talking to you about your game while you're playing. Unless you're Magnus streaming a Blitz game online with your friends. But normally when you play a chess game, it's a briefly solitary activity, right? Where you're in your own head. And whenever a game is done, you can come in and chat with us and go over stuff, what's going on, ask questions about your game. I'm happy to answer them. That's what I'm here for. And you'll also be able to go back later on and watch the VOD, the video on demand, the recorded video. You can go back and watch that later, and it'll have, my comments on your game, hopefully, for you to review and compare with what you were thinking when you were playing the game. So that's how it goes. Any questions, anybody? The tricky/annoying. I think that for the most part, my comments are not intended to demoralize anybody. I think they're meant to be reasonably at the level of the players playing. So if I'm commenting on a 1200s game, then I'll praise them for things a 1200 should be praised for and criticize them for things a 1200 should be criticized for. Likewise for a 1600 or a 2000 or a 300 or a 2300. So ideally, and you can tell me if this is not the case, for any of you when you watch the commentary on your own game later on, let me know if it's not the case. But ideally, the commentary on your game is fair. I don't judge a 1200 by a 2200 standard or praise a 2200 for putting a pawn in the center on the first move as if they were a 400, you know? So hopefully you find it approximately appropriate to your level. Neither ridiculous praise for stuff that's below you, nor harsh criticism for stuff that's above you. And it should be, just useful, I would think, yeah? It should ideally be useful for you. It should be coming in at your level. That's the only way it's useful, which is the goal. Neither especially moralizing nor demoralizing, right? But maybe useful, which can encourage you to keep working and help you to keep working in a positive way. Beyond that, I see 1700 plus arena starting in 50 seconds. So kind of an on your marks, get set, go situation for people in that arena. And I'm going to have a little problem switching between arenas here, just a little problem with it. But we're going to do the best we can with it. So I have to open 3 different tabs here. A few people left the under 1300 arena, which starts 2 minutes after the other arena. If you're under 1,000, do consider joining the under 1300 arena. There are opponents rated 400, 500, 800 for you. It's perfect. So come on in, play 1 or 2 games, and I hope you have fun. So what I'm going to try and do is sort of click back and forth between these tabs. Over 1700 just started, and 1300 to 1700 just started. So if you're in those 2 arenas, check. You might have a game that's just started. It might be your move. And now is a great moment to mute things down and check back in. Check back in with me in between games. All right, under 1300s, you guys will be starting in about a minute, I think. 1 minute and 20 seconds till kickoff for you all. I'm going to just start opening up frantically a bunch of games here, okay? So then at least if I lose the arena, I'll have a game position to go look at. We've got the architect of the future of chess here, Jack Stenglein, playing the Karl Khan and facing a fantasy variation from Xiam Li. Love that. Definitely interested to see that. Here's Piotr Janas playing a Knight C3 Jobava London. An opening that's just not to my own personal taste. So, President Noir, you're in an actual gym right now? Like maybe running on a treadmill while watching the commentary and stuff? Okay, so I got those games up. Now we're going to go over here. And we're going to get the 13 to 1700 games up. An elliptical, similar, right? Nice. Okay, so in that case, welcome to the dojo. We're very happy to have you, and we hope that you'll be happy to be here with us as well. I'm going to be opening up some more games here. Da-na-na-na-na. All your base are belong to you. Oh, that's very nice. How friendly. That's awesome that you're at the gym as you're doing this. If you guys can think of a game for today for me to get some exercise in, let me know. Last time we were doing commentary on Kostya's games, it was 5 push-ups per pawn he put on the 3rd rank because Kostya was basically playing a hippo that day. But if you want to give me some push-ups or some squats or some burpees or anything easy I can do here in my room, like a drinking game without any drinking because I don't drink. let's do that. It's good to get a little movement in along with the chess. Let me find the link to the 1700 arena for a second here for myself. Copy it, put it here, hit it up, and check some games over here. We've got Kraai versus Skibex. Awesome. 5 jumping jacks for every King's Gambit. That's going to be really easy, sure. We'll add that to the list, Soren. Anybody who plays a King's Gambit, we're going to do 5 jumping jacks. I mean, I pretty much jump for joy anyway when somebody plays the King's Gambit. So here we've got an aggressive opening repertoire from Hokey Gamer playing this Grand Prix attack. 5 squats per loose piece that drops off and gets taken. Yeah, loose pieces drop off, LPDO. We got Kieternach in the house against Spider Zlatan. And I was going to say, this king is being looked at. This is actually a very, very famous opening. The Marshall attack, I think it's called. Black sacks a pawn against the Ruy Lopez. And really aims at White's king. So that's nice. Oh! King's Gambit from Sinaberga. All right, let's jump for joy. 2, 3, 4, 5. I didn't even have to look at the moves. You know, I see this. I know it's a King's Gambit accepted. Boom. Great. Over in England, Sinaberga. Great. And Black has played a variation that shows they want to give away this pawn in order to keep this one. Right? This D5 line. And then just not recapturing it with the queen, not going after it with the knight, and going for protection of this pawn. So D5 was played to let the black pieces flow out freely without getting harassed by the white pawns at E4 and D4. And then they want to hold this pawn. So White's going to be pretty strong in the center with these 2 pawns, and Black's going to be pretty strong on the king side with these 2. White has to be very careful to keep their king covered in this line in general over here on the king side. And they have to try to play towards their trump and get the center pawns rolling at some point. So, there we go. All right, and I should have lots of games open that I'm watching here. Yeah, so there was another one I wanted to watch, which was Jack's game, because it was the fantasy variation. It's not showing up for me. Wow, Piotr Janas's game heated up over here. Let me try and slowly go find. It is so hard to use some aspects of the chess.com website now. All right, Sunday Rapid. Let's go click on Jack's game. There we go. Got it up. That was really hard to do. Really hard to do. Okay, so see how it went for him. Knight f6 here, and that usually encourages White to push forward with e5, but they don't. Jack castles. Now it comes. Maneuvers the knight towards c4. Knight f3, bishop f5. Oh, and White looks to break that blockade. The key to this position is Black has to keep control of these 2 squares. If Black can keep control of those 2 squares I just highlighted there, then White's not able to initiate an attack against Black's king. So that's kind of critical. Sometimes you'll see people playing h5, even though their king is over here and white's king isn't, right? What's the idea? It's controlling these two squares. Here Jack played bishop f5, and after knight h4, he decided to back off, which is mildly encouraging for white. And I think white might already be wondering, is it time to play f5 as a pawn sack, just to open up the bishop on e3 when I get the chance? Okay, white worries about knight c4, taking one of the bishops, and spends a move on b3. But this is really nice. I mean, it doesn't mean it's a mistake from white, but Jack is happy that white had to pay that tribute, I imagine, because it gives him a target on the queen side for counterplay, and it slows down the whole f5 thing. An amazing game with a mouse slip to throw it. That is both exhilarating and agonizing at once. Oh, look at that. Jack's going straight for the hook. All right, and white's going for f5, right? I mean, white's going for f5. When white played knight h4, I really wondered about the move e6 for black. It's very committal, but it's just trying to set up that blockade, right? And you hit the knight, so it has to decide if it's trading or coming back. The committal part is that white could try to eventually play h3, g4, and maybe trap your bishop. But you've got the e4 square, so you'll never lose a full piece, maybe just some part of your structure. And when you play h5, it'll be hard for white to achieve g4. So I think maybe black could/should play e6 at that point versus backing off. But let's see what happens now. Jack's kind of thinking quite a bit. It's not obvious what black wants to do about f5 from white, which white's sort of saying is the threat here. Knight on b8's unhappy with the bishop here. And to me, a4 is not yet as powerful a play as f5 for white. So at the moment, to me, it looks good for white at the moment. Like f5 could be very strong. And white's pieces are a little bit better coordinated, which it's easier to do when you've got the space advantage, right? It's easier to coordinate your pieces. Part of the point. Maybe black's going to play e6 now to really stop f5. The queen will hit the knight, so white won't be able to just play g4 and bum rush black. Okay, e6 was the choice, yeah. Couple minutes of thought on that, which in a 15-minute game is considerable. 2.5 minutes. It's a big chunk of your time, but it was a big decision, right? Because I think Jack didn't want to block in the light squared bishop. And also didn't want to allow f5. So you're kind of hesitating over two things you don't really like. So white should have to pay a tempo now. And that's either knight f3 or defending the knight. And I have this feeling like queen f2 might be the best move. But let's see what white did. They retreated, okay? And Jack completes the development with the knights before going a4. If you just play a4, there's some chance that white sort of passes you by, locking up the queen side. Plus, if white castles, trading's not that amazing just yet, as white's well poised to recapture. So I don't think you're in like a mega hurry to play a4. You want to have the move at hand, and there's a very good chance you'll play it, but you don't necessarily need to rush it. Completing development for me would also be a higher priority, just like Jack chose here. If I click over here, I can see the King's Gambit game at the same time, huh? That's pretty cool. Just with an angry chess.com warning bar across it, but a nice thing about the arenas versus the tournaments with scheduled round times is that people could show up an hour late 2 hours late to the event and come play a little bit, right? So it's very, very drop-in friendly, I think. Let's see how this King's Gambit went. So c6 we expected, getting castled to e3. So that's developing the bishop calmly versus d4. It's going to be hard to win back this pawn. At the moment, I kind of like black's position. Oh, that was before I saw the c6 pawn hanging. I think maybe queen c7 to defend both of these pawns extra and just try and keep white bottled up. Black played knight a6, then white plays d4 to stop knight c5, and we've caught up with the live position. Oh, right, if bishop takes c6, black has queen b6 check in reserve. Yeah. Queen b6 check in reserve. So d4 is partly to threaten bishop takes c6 now, as well as to keep the knight from coming to c5. And now, again, I would say black should defend this pawn. So I was still thinking of queen c7 personally, just overprotecting all my important pawns. Those are my two most important pawns, actually, weirdly. This f4 pawn cramps white's kingside a bit, and the c6 pawn keeps the bishop and knight at bay. So these are really my two favorite pawns. I would love to overprotect them. I know that's not the dream of most queens to sit around guarding pawns, right? It's not like a famous chess strategy, like you want to be defending weak pawns with your queen. But that is my feeling of what I would want to do this position. I actually find these pawns that important. As Abdul says, a3 comes in from Sinaberga, and the idea is to remove the defender, right? So black defended the c6 pawn, but defended it with a very, very exposed steed here on b4, and that gives white the idea maybe I could kick the knight, force the knight to retreat, and then actually capture this pawn anyway, and white's queenside pieces come alive. White's center pawns come alive once that pawn is gone. So we'll see. But it looks like white's likely going to be able to grab that pawn. And yeah. We'll see how big an like how good the position is, but it's going to have a big impact if that pawn goes. One variation I can give you folks, and I'm scared of messing things up, so I'm going to give you this variation just saying it instead of playing it out, which may be a little tricky for some, but just give it a try. Knight d5, bishop takes c6, knight e3, attacking the queen and rook. Bishop takes e3, pawn takes e3. That line would leave white with the awkward knight on c3, blocking the c pawn. It would open up black's dark squared bishop, create an opposite colored bishop kind of feeling with that bishop being on an open diagonal. The problem for black with that line is that knight d5, bishop c6, knight e3, the rook on a8 is going to be hanging at the end as black plays knight d5, right? So bishop takes c6. Black would rather trade white's bishop than white's knight. You see that? Would much rather. But because the rook's hanging, knight e3 is going to be a big sacrifice, right? You're going to be sacking the exchange on a8 as well as the pawn on c6. So bishop takes c6 might force black to take on c3 because of these attacks. And if that's the case, white's going to be looking pretty good to my eye, right? With 3 pawns here to try and use in the middle of the board. Yeah, it could be quite nice for white. Let's click over here and see if we can still see Jack's game as well. Knight a6, a3, rook c8. The reason I'm not making moves on that other board or clearing the blue bar has to do with the difficulties of navigating the chess.com website. So I'm doing it on purpose because I think that making moves on that other board will cause the board to stop auto-refreshing, adding moves to it. And refreshing that tab with that board, I think, will cause me, when I go back to this tab, to not be able to see the 1700 plus games. So it's completely stupid and awkward. But I'm not doing it by accident. Okay, so Xian plays knight. I was going to say knight. I'm getting ahead of myself. A3 to restrain the knight. Plays A3 to stop knight B4. Keep this piece at bay. And now Jack needs to play for C5. There's kind of nothing else to do. By now, if you ever play A4, B4, you're really kind of closed there and you're just waiting for white's attack. So Rook C8. Xiam castles to connect the pieces. Xiam's not particularly over-rushing this F5 break. They're actually playing very full board positional, right? Trying to limit Jack's knights with these little pawn moves, and then trying to coordinate all of white's pieces and connect them. C5. There's a weird move. Maybe a mouse slip of bishop takes A6. I mean, your goal can't be to trade black's worst piece with your best piece, can it? That can't be the real goal. Oh, I see we've got the wrong title on our show here. Let's do it. Viewer, Rapid, Tournament. It's just Hokie and I doing the best we could with juggling 3 channels and Twitch and all. Okay. There's a very interesting calculation here. Bishop takes A6, pawn takes D4. Because if you recapture, not only do you have 2 isolated pawns, but you drop your center pawn, knight gets kicked, and it's a bit short on good squares, isn't it? What's the next move for black here? Knight A8 is the only thing I see. And this could potentially be... On Chess Nerd's channel, it says viewer rapid. Ay. This could potentially be very good for white, right? This extra pawn here. So bishop A6, I think a critical move would be C takes D4. And now, if you just retreat the bishop, of course, black recovers their piece really happily. You could capture here, and black gets this. And this position's interesting. You know, material's equal. Black's pawn structure looks kind of bad on the A file, but their pressure on the C file is pretty decent. Their minor pieces are pretty well limited by white. It's very hard to evaluate. Luckily for me, who's not necessarily good at evaluating things, we can just crunch some more variations till we find a variation that's very easy to evaluate. So I'll give you that. After bishop takes B7, we're going to go pawn takes E3, queen takes E3, rook B8, and here white has 1 extra pawn after the bishop escapes. 1 extra pawn for white, and positionally everything pretty nice for black other than that, right? So, okay, this one's also hard to evaluate. Don't worry, I've got something coming that's going to clear it all up. Oh no, I don't. Shoot. I was hoping that this move was going to clarify everything by attacking this piece, but actually takes, and it's still equal pieces. And hard to evaluate. Ah, no. If someone had just hung a piece in this variation, it would have been so much easier for me. And for the players, I'm sure. Let's not forget the players, Xian Li and Jack, trying to figure out whether bishop takes a6 is a good move or not. Man, that is really hard to say in a rapid game. That would be really hard to say. My instinct is it would be pretty good for white, and that bishop b5 maybe was a mouse slip. Maybe he thought so hard about evaluations and other complicated things that the bishop was dropped a moment too soon. Yeah, every single option is hard to evaluate, and there's a lot of them. That just makes it worse. We've got like 5 different capture variations to evaluate, and none of them are clear. I think white's a little bit better in several of them, I would say. I hear you, B-Pole. I hear you. Every time you wished your opponent would just hang a piece and it'll be much easier for me to evaluate. Come on. Just make it easy on both of us. It'll be easier for you too, right? Because you'll know you're losing. It'll be so much easier. Okay, so bishop b5 was played. Jack traded on d4, opening the c file. Immediately tried to apply some pressure to that c file. Here takes with the knight, because the knight on b6. A sucked against the b3 pawn. B was, catching strays from the bishop on the diagonal. So, knight d7, correct, almost certainly. Queen b8. Thanks for the help, B-Pole. But I actually think B-Pole sounds pretty cool, so we're gonna try that for a little bit, as long as nobody minds. Queen b8. The queen's not happy. White's knights, on the other hand, are very happy. Even though black's the one opening up their strategic c-file, somehow white's got this square and this square. That's enough to make a full pair of knights happy. Ay, a pawn! Munched a pawn. That was a pretty yummy pawn, too. I gotta say, those white knights, now there's the queen with them too. They're kind of owning the area, aren't they? They're covering a flurry of squares, these pieces. Maybe Jack should go sink a knight over here. Or maybe he should look to change up the nature of the game, since he's down a pawn and down to 2 minutes, and maybe he should look for f6. Right here it might lose knight e6, but maybe you should play something with having in mind f6 to kind of change the flow and the style of the game from a competitive, from the gaming sort of sporting aspect of chess, right? Like, I don't know if it's correct from the scientific aspect of chess, but maybe going for f6 to change the flow of the game a little bit. And if you wanted to go f6, you might actually move this knight. That would be sort of the difference, right? You might move this knight, quote unquote, towards e4, but you leave this knight to have influence on this pawn break, right? Whereas if we go this knight, it's because it's the worst placed piece if we're just sort of holding the structure and defending the queen side. Okay, so Jack went rook c5, queen backed up. Down to a minute. Black is really quite constrained. White has played in a very restrictive style this game, actually. Grabbed that space and then did not go for the crazy attack. Just, really limited the black pieces quite nicely. And that makes it simply hard to play for black. Simply hard to play. Welcome, Summerick. Come play with us. Come play with us. Let's cast an eye over at the King's Gambit briefly. So after white gained this pawn, they played d5. Because if they retreat the bishop, they might drop their extra pawn. I understand. The game's actually still very close despite grabbing that pawn. Very close. Because white's pawn structure with the extra pawn is just easily blockaded. Yeah, it's still a very competitive game. Ooh, what's happened here? Knight d5, knight b3, queen b6. They're mid-tactical flurry. Sinaberga. Hey, Renga. King h1. I think white could maybe have saved this piece with knight to d4 still, right? I mean, it's going back on what you just said with knight b3. There, a loose piece dropped off, and that's 5 squats. Right, everybody? Huh. There we go. And it should be a good situation for black now, right? With that loose piece in hand. Maybe bring out this rook here. Sorry, here. In order to try and not hang our own loose pieces on this d file. Black's got 3 loose pieces. Better be careful. Better be careful with 3 loose pieces. How's Jack doing with his 30 seconds or so on the clock, maybe? Knight d6, rook d8. Shyam has been thinking. So Jack still has a minute. I was afraid he'd be down some. Knight e3 is the choice. That's... oh, it's threatening checkmate. But... okay, so it sacks a pawn. Black's maybe hoping to recover their pawns immediately here. There comes the recapture. Now, this is a classic colonial matchup of England versus Ireland, isn't it? I'm just realizing. England, Ireland. Down with the colonizer. Hang more pieces, white. Yeah, Noel wanted that pawn on c3. That's what knight e3 was about. But be careful. Be careful. You're the one with hanging pieces right now, my friend. You are the one with hanging pieces. They're powerful bishops on an open board. But as long as white has a queen, a lot of possible forkage. Here. Both players under a minute. Jack now on 30 seconds. Still with basically no squares for the pieces. White comes back into these outposts. There we go. Jack got the square. Good job, Jack. Got a piece to somewhere. What's happening here? White's just sitting there thinking. Doesn't know what to do. Definitely avoid the queen trade. Good choice. Good choice, Sinaberga. Good choice. I see an Irishman in chat, so I may have stirred up too much there. From this side of the pond, I don't even know what I'm stirring, but maybe I should be careful. Say nothing more about England and Ireland. But there goes another pawn. And Noel continues to pursue the queen trade. But these pieces need squares. Somebody blundered something? Let's see. What did they blunder? Knight e4. Knight e4 takes. Knight d6 takes. Bishop a1. Rook a1. Queen d6. Jack gets out! Oh my god, Jack! It's a great feeling when you've been like stymied and stifled for a long time. And then suddenly you get a breath and you come out and you say, oh my god, the world is so beautiful. I forgot. I've been in my little hole playing video games for so long. I forgot about birds tweeting and the air moving as opposed to just sitting in one place. And of course, along with that breath of fresh air, he got his precious coconut back. So everything's good in Jackville, except for the fact that he's now playing a 30-second match with Xiam Li. And, well, it's not really that fun to play chess in 30 seconds. It's mostly stressful. Bishop strikes the rook, 20-some seconds each. Our other board also must be really low on time. Oh, it seems to have ended. It says Noel Brown won by resignation. So all we know is the player who had black in our King's Gambit with the bishop pair did not hang their bishop pair and did convert that game. Or their opponent flagged, you know. I mean, it was definitely at a point in a game where people often just flag. And that's how it ends. All right. Jack's knight trying to get away from... It's been on a6 for a long, long time, right? It's trying to make its way into the game. Jack uses a sort of a side pin here for white to worry about. Gets kicked. Do you go in? Do you stay defensive? Do you choose a new angle? 6 seconds for white. Jack's got a 20-second advantage now suddenly. Come on, Xiam, don't flag! All right, defends the b-pawn and tethers white's queen to this rook. And this knight is getting killed by the c-pawn. Still sucking this knight over here. Still sucking. It looks for new territory. Abdul wanted to send it back to a6. Jack's sending it where I wanted to, the king side. The king side, where the white king lives. Go kill that king! Kill the king, kill the king, kill the king. That's definitely what black should do strategically here, folks. It's not just like a 20-second thing. White flags. Black is executing the correct strategic idea. You know, white's got a 3-on-1 on the queen side. You've got the open file. You got to send this knight towards the king and start harassing that king. You know, defending the rook also gives you ideas of like queen e2, rook e1, etc. So this is a great maneuver, honestly, that he found in just seconds to send the knight over to the king side. Yeah, and Xiam apparently, like me, just doesn't really play under 30-second chess, you know. They must have hesitated a bit and flagged and so forth, just like I would have had I been in their shoes. And Abdul says knight a6 is just winning. You don't need strategy. Knight a6, bishop somewhere. We don't know exactly where, but somewhere. And then just push the e-pawn. Why couldn't we push the e-pawn before? Because if bishop takes... We could have. Wait, Abdul, we didn't even need to move our knight. I mean, moving the knight is nice and all, but we could have just played e3, e2 as Jack, huh? Yeah, because you were probably thinking bishop e3 and the queen on the rook, right? But there's queen... Oh, new game. There's queen takes e3 as check. So he could have just gone e3, e2, and then seen what he wanted to do next. That said, the idea of swinging the knight... Oh, how do you like a taste of your own magic, Potter? Banana Flipper throws the Carl Khan at Jack, and Jack responds with his own fantasy variation. Whoa! All right. This bishop b4 move sort of re-threatens at some point to go d-e, f-e, queen h4 check. Although if de comes, you can also just not capture and wait for black to capture on f3 like a, whatchamacallit, like a Black Redeemer. And that's what Jack does. He plays a3, he says, give me that dark squared bishop, and then knight h3. Beautiful. Jack knows his stuff. knows his stuff. This threatens fe4, queen h4 check, knight f2, strangely defending e4. These are slightly unusual patterns, right? But if you've played too much Black Redeemer and other weird related gambits, as I have, and as perhaps Jack has, then it's just second nature. You just know about it. You just know the patterns. And the idea is now that if black takes on f3, you put your queen there, bishop there, get castled, play a nice Black Redeemer where you've got the bishop pair. And the extra c-pawn supporting your center, so moves like c5 and e5 are not as powerful. Okay, banana flipper goes knight f6, trying to keep the tension. And white, I think, can just get the position they want with fe4, knight e4, queen f3. I think. I'm not sure. This is a little bit analogous to the following line. Right? For those players who hate or do badly against the winnower and have no regard for pawns, you can play a3 here against the French. You don't really play knight h3 in the Black Redeemer per se b-pull. You play it in a bunch of openings like this one I'm about to show you. This is the one most related to what Jack and Banana Flipper have. These are, once you know about the Deemer, you can play an e4 repertoire where you try to play Deemer-like themes, right? Like this f3 from Jack here. There's also this line. Knight c3, pawn takes e4, Caro, and then instead of taking, you go bishop c4. Black develops, and then you play a delayed Black Redeemer where you say c6 is not the best defensive line against the Black Redeemer, right? So once you know the Deemer ideas, in all the e4 openings where your opponent plays d5, so Caros, Frenches, sometimes, like a Scandi or a Scandinavian, you can play sort of Deemer themes. And so let me just show you guys this one. That's the one most related to it. Here, you play f3. And in this position, white's not even threatening fe4 because there's queen h4 check. And in this position, one of the main moves for black is c5. I don't know the names of a lot of chess openings, but I think this is called the Winckelmann-Riemer gambit. This Deemerized way of playing against the winnower. The winnower is a real, strong stylistic opening, right? Where most e4 players play the worst against the winnower of any black defense to e4, pretty much. It's the most common one for people to be bad against if they're an e4 player. That said, somebody who's really good at the winnower is unlikely to be very good at the Winckelmann-Riemer gambit, right? So this is a dubious line from white. We're gambiting a pawn and weakening our king without having any pieces developed. Okay, so let's just say it looks a little bit dubious. Black has no pieces out either, so it's not the end of the world dubious, but a little dubious. But it's something that's going to put your average winnower player way outside of their comfort zone, right? Until you get up to, 2,000, 2,200, 2,400 levels and you start hitting more and more players who are comfortable in almost every position, who don't have as strong stylistic strengths and weaknesses, more well-rounded players. Okay, so this gambit here, which, I've played in OTB classical chess against at least one master in the past, so it's somewhat viable. The idea is just saying that this dark squared bishop is worth so much that you're going to play a broken Deemer just for them not to have that dark squared bishop. And this is a line where the knight generally goes to h3 because you can't force black to play ef3. You don't have the knight on c3. You don't have the pressure against e4. So very often you end up going knight h3 and then maybe even knight g5 to add pressure to e4. And you bring your queen to f3 instead of the knight. So what Jack is doing here is he's saying, okay, you're playing this French plus Caro against my fantasy line. So now I'm going to play a Winckelmann-Riemer where if you play c5, which is a main move, you're going to be a full tempo down on the winnower version of the Winckelmann-Riemer. You see that, folks? He hasn't wasted a single move outside of the moves that white would normally play in that opening. So black goes knight f6. bishop g5, queen a5, hitting this. White's going to have to play queen d2 or bishop d2, and watch out for maybe knight d5 coming from black. If you go queen d2, then knight d5, and it's hard to defend this. If you go bishop d2, there's e3 deflecting your bishop. What will Jack choose? Queen d2. Oh, or ef3, yeah. Oh, right, because if black played knight d5, I mean, yeah, okay, this pawn, but you just take here. Knight takes here. And, I mean, this is a pretty good gambit. These pieces are weird over here, and you've got the full center and 3 tempi of development. And, yeah. Okay, but ef3, that's a different story. Now, Jack might not be so happy. He might want to trade on f6 to avoid knight d5. That's why he stopped and thought for a bit. Okay, but then he just took back the pawn. Abdul, Winnower close to losing by force is a bit of a strong opinion, but I do think, like, objectively the Winnower is a little bit worse than some other lines, like the classical, right? But not by so much that it can't be played to mess up your opponent's preference of styles of position. I think the Winnower is very playable, largely because of how many people are not good at playing against it. It's just so different from other e4 openings. Okay, somehow knight d5 wasn't working or didn't get played. Maybe, White just embraces their gambit here and says, hey, c4. You can trade the queens even if you want. I'm just confident in the free-flowing position here. The bishop pair, the center, the rook's getting in the game quickly. Yeah, maybe. Maybe knight d5 is not such a big deal. Okay. Yeah, that must have been a couple years ago, Rangod, because now that opinion has been revised by even stronger supercomputers who have said that the French is good enough, even against knight c3. That's the latest supercomputer eval. Yeah. So good on the French, right? Good on the French. I like for there to be a few more openings that exist, just so that there's some of the variety is viable. I'm a fan of viable variety, and the French and Winnower in particular is a very, very different style of e4 game. Wow. Abdul with the Super GM knowledge, yeah. Have a good one, Eric. We'll see you next time. Well, now Jack's really done it. Bishop f4. Really asking for knight d5 to remove his extra bishop or whatever. But h6 is weakening the g file, so black has to be careful around that too. It's very complicated, you know. These openings generate a very different style of position. I think it may be that Jack couldn't play bishop h4 because of queen h5. Maybe he just would lose a piece, so he just had to head this way. And now maybe the plan against knight d5 is to give the second pawn with this move. And then, yeah, play with 2 minus pawns, but this bishop. Who's to say? Who's to say? What is or is not enough for 2 pawns? King d2 is reasonable, but I would go with this. Oh, we got queen h5 played anyway. It's very hard to argue successfully against a computer, isn't it, people? If you accidentally fall below the rating of your group. What a dilemma you're in, Sergeant Major. I would say just keep playing in your group. Believe that you're worthy of the rating you had at the start of the day, and that if you just keep playing well, you will rejoin your group. But, you know, it's freely open to you to do as you prefer. Yeah, you can actually freely make that choice yourself. So here, Jack's got a choice between like flowing with the knight and giving another pawn, or playing queen g2 to defend everything. Or I guess knight g1 defends things, but oh, that would be a stinker. Yeah, defends it. I think that's a good call. This is a very exciting game, isn't it? Don't you guys love this opening? It may feel like Jack's position is sort of a rickety thing where you're down a pawn and you're just stumbling around trying to defend your stuff. Like, what did we sack a pawn for? But look at this piece and this piece. Black is giving white trouble with their 3 pretty pieces, right? But they've also got 3 ugly pieces. And so far, no plan for what to do with them. And white, you know, has got easy access to files for the rooks. That's generally the gambitier's advantage, you know, more choices of files for your rooks. So, and this bishop is still, you know, unopposed. So, I mean, for all we know, white's better. They might be losing. They might be better. They might be winning. Who knows? Abdul would feel like losing already as white. I'm starting to suspect white is better, actually, but who knows? Who knows? It is truly a difficult position to evaluate and to keep track of the fluctuations in evaluation. I think black may want to put a pawn on g5 this game to block the g file and fight for some dark squares, fight against these minor pieces. But when you have half your pieces not developed and no plan for developing them, sometimes it's hard to trust a pawn to do the work that, you know, the bishop and 2 rooks were supposed to do. Yeah, white has way more activity, and it's going to get worse. The reason why black is playing so many concrete and violent moves, folks, is that if black plays trivial moves, and I see black has just played a terrific move, e5, bam. If black plays trivial moves, it's going to tend to get worse for black in a hurry. Once white adds rooks to, you know, b1 and g1, or e1, or e1 and b1, or e1 and g1, right? This is nice because this bishop comes to life, right? This move is really solving what black needs to solve. What don't you believe, Abdul? Against g5, bishop d6 looks pretty decent, right? But this e5 move, you don't believe this? The idea is to put the knight here, hit this. Black would be pretty amazing there, right? But the question is all these queen g7 lines. Broadly speaking, white's got 2 options. You retreat the bishop and say, well, that's the point of having the super solid center. And you don't do any immediate confrontation. If this knight moves, you'll move your knight. And you're still just trying to castle and get your rooks into the game. But black's improved their situation with e5 then, for sure, because the bishop just got into the game, right? But the real question is, what's happening with the queen g7 lines? And it's a critical moment White can go either queen g7 or take on e5 and then queen g7, right? And Jack spent 2 minutes on this because it was a critical moment and then traded here and now thinking again, right? Now it's queen g7, knight d3 or knight f3. This knight's hanging now, but so is this knight because before the knight on d7 was defending it. Had we gone straight queen g7, Black would have rook g8 hitting our queen with the knight defended, and it feels like the only move would be queen h6, and Black would take the bishop, right? And I think that would be a piece sack that isn't very plausible for White. So it made sense to take here with either the bishop or the pawn if you want to go for queen g7. Merle says we can't go queen g7 now. Okay. Many options for Black in response. Knight d3, knight f3, rook g8. Many options. Maybe knight f3 is good. God, I don't know for sure. Jack has gone for queen g7, by the way, folks. Just played. 6.5 minutes. We can praise both these players for using a lot of time in the opening this time, actually, because it was clearly a series of really critical moves, right? The important moves came much earlier this game than they do in a lot of other games. And you need to be prepared as you become a stronger player. These players are very high rated, right? As you become a stronger player, you need to be prepared to use your time in less obvious patterns, right? Like a beginner, you might tell them something like, use about 25% of your time on the opening and 45% of your time on the, or you can make it even more rounded and easy for them, right? And 50% of your time on the middle game and 25% of your time on the end game. You just give like a guideline and you start telling them like, try to use overall about 90% of the time in the time control, right? So save a couple minutes for an emergency, but in general, if you're playing a 15-minute game, try to use 12 or 13 minutes. If you're playing a 60-minute game, try to use 50 to 56 minutes, etc., right? But as you get stronger, you have to make more and more precise adjustments, right? And you have to be willing to use your time in non-standard ways. So Jack and Banana Flip are both recognized in this game. The opening choices are more important than in a lot of other games. We could easily end up clearly winning or losing by so much that we don't really need time later in the game, and that basically the result is already decided by the end of the opening. Therefore, you see them using more than half of their time in the opening. So let's see if Black has an answer yet. No, it's thinking about it after queen g7. And goes for knight f3 check. I have like some kind of instinct that this might be right, but against king d1, I'm not sure what the follow-up is. So maybe it's as simple as going rook g8, queen f6, bishop h3. And then White goes king c1, and actually nobody will have lost the game just yet. Oddly. I'm like surprised to see the game continue. White king basically just wants to waltz away if possible. So there are problems with other moves for the king, right? Like king f2, you're in range of knight g4, which might be an issue, but I guess you're planning to take with the king. Holy cannoli, Jack goes for it. So real briefly, king f1 is obviously bad because Black develops the bishop with check and taking a piece, right? King e2 is bad because then you're in line for double checks from the knight on top of everything else. So it was really between these two moves were the candidates. And I thought, just trying to run this way. Jack goes this way. The king is still more in range of some pieces. But the rooks are connected. So Jack can counterattack with rook e1 much faster this way. Like if black played rook g8 here and takes, like I said against king d1, here Jack would just slam a rook onto e1, right? Sack in exchange and, just sack one, sack both, right? Just immediately brutalize black with the bishop pair on the open board like this. And against king f8, bishop h6 wins the game. Against king here, obviously he has at least perpetual, but I guess queen g8 is clearly winning. Yeah. So rook e1, I think, would be just game over, knockout. Let's see, black's played something. They went for knight g4. Yeah, that was the move I was afraid of here. Maybe this, maybe also king g3, because the bishop's not hitting h3. Let's see. No, he took on f3 like I thought. Seems more reasonable. Now I expect the bishop to drop back. Rook e1 is coming. I think Jack might be winning with his king taking hammer blows here. I didn't specifically tell these two players not to listen, Sergeant Major, but I did make the announcement to everybody at the start of the event, and periodically we try and remind people of that. The rook is still hanging, and in general, rook e1 is going to be checkmate. So I don't know what banana flipper is to do. Honestly, I feel like here after king f2, banana flipper maybe should have thought even longer if this was the best they found. Right? It was knight g4, king f3 here. Maybe they needed to think even longer here, looking for another alternative. So this looks like the unopposed dark squared bishop's going to emerge victorious here, even with the king taking a leading role in the charge and absorbing a bunch of checks. Rook e1 has come in. Oh, look, black has fe6 discovered check if you go for the game-winning checkmate. And now if bishop f5, there's knight h2. Jack may have put the wrong rook on e1. Check. Here, there would be this move. Winning the knight is the idea. Although maybe just h5. You can take on e6 with as many pieces as you like. This discovered thing is game breaking. I don't know what the heck is going on, but let's stick with the game because they got 4 minutes and stuff to figure out. Holy moly. Wow, Jack sacks it. He sacks it anyway. What a dude. Or long castle after bishop f5. Yeah, Master Toaster, that might also be a move that defends. Oh no, there would be queen g4 then maybe? Hang on. No, there wouldn't have been castles, Master Toaster. There's a lot of pins here, but I think white can take this way because the queen's on that. And this queen looks trapped, so I think white just wins. Just wins the piece. But Jack is going full nuts. He sacks in exchange in order to keep moving his own king. It's a loony game today. And I half expected his king was going to just come forward as much as possible here. But there was queen g2 then. I guess, could you, for argument's sake, run your king just desperately? No. Desperate to get mated. Yeah. All right. King absorbs more checks. This position's bananas, and now I feel like it's flipped around to being a black win, but maybe I'm missing something. Oh yeah, I'm probably missing something. Well, the bishop f5 was in the position with rook a e1. But basically, I thought black's defense, Abdul, would be h5, just defending the knight. And I still don't know what happens there. I didn't necessarily refute it or anything. I just don't know what happens. Maybe queen g5 to prevent the king from skipping town. You know, I don't know. But, okay, let's see what's happening here. Takes, check. Wow. I had expected, you know, queen f1. But throws in the wild intermezzo. Another check is scored. What is going on? I guess the king has to move to d1. What a series of tactics from Banana Flipper, too. They were ready to battle this whole game here with Jack. Wow. The difference between rook a1 and rook he1, Abdul, is whether or not black has knight h2 check. In general, in all those lines. Rook a1 leaves a rook on h1, so that knight h2 can always be answered by rook h2, and then black has queen f5. Anyway, the game goes on, I guess, even there. But that was the difference, was to be less wrecked by knight h2. I think black's going to go for it here. Oh my god! By surprise, they developed the rook instead of capturing the rook. Every move a brilliant surprise. And there's a checkmate in 3 or 4 just being slammed out here by Banana Flipper, showing the class. What a calculation. Yes! Wow, that was a game for the ages. Bravo to both players. Yes! Yes! Beauty prize. A beauty prize already. Congrats on both players for playing with such verve. That was a barn burner. Heck yes. Heck yes. Kyle Boone is in there in 3 seconds. Beeple joins me in applauding. Jack and Banana Flipper, well done. Woo! Good stuff. Should have just taken the knight, says Jack. I don't even know when. That was a heck of a game. Should have just taken the knight. Let me think if I know when. Oh my god, when the bishop was pinned! Alright, folks. I don't know I don't know how many of you can just remember the position in your head, but Jack had a clear winning moment that we didn't even notice. But after rook check bishop e6, he could have played queen takes g4 with no more ado. I spent so much time thinking about bishop f5, but the bishop on e6 was pinned. Oh no, but even if the bishop e6 is pinned, if you go queen takes g4, black plays queen takes g4 and it's check, your king can't take on g4. Right? So even if the bishop's pinned, you can't capture the knight, I don't think. Unless I... You're right, Goldsman. Send them packing, okay? Beat up this cheater and send them back to the 13 to 1700 section. All right? I'm not going to help you do it, so don't listen to anything more I say. But send them packing. And I'm just teasing Kyle. I know it was an honest mistake. You threw the play command. You got in here in 1 second. You were in a rush to get busy, which I approve of heartily. I was surprised how fast it was from Kyle saying exclam play to Kyle's game popping up. It was less than 2 seconds. So there's the string of links to click, and yeah, it's not immediately maybe not immediately lining up correctly, but under 1300 is this first link, and then 13 to 1700 is this second link, 3618431. All right. So, Jack's game was still so complicated that we don't know what the answer was. It was not queen takes g4. The position was bonkers. Other possible moves for Jack were moves like queen g5 or something, just keeping the black king from castling. Yeah. Wow. Wow. All right, we've got something like an exchange French on our hands here, it looks like. Yep. Pieces are coming streaming out. $1,500s bleed, I believe. Yes, we all do. We all bleed. How is Merle's doing? Shall we go look? Shall we go look? Hey, hey, Acratic. What's up? All right, let's go look for Merle's. Two more friends for me. All right, how is Merle's doing? Knight, rook, bishop pair. Looks good for Blunderfest at the moment. Looks good at the moment. And B2 is facing some threat here. Yeah, trades to reveal it. After rook b2, king a1, I don't see exactly what the win is, but you'd think there would be one. Could it be bishop e6? I mean, the two bishops are winning, period, but normally you would see like just a simple knockout here, and I don't. Oh yeah, it's just here. I just assumed the king would move somewhere. There was nowhere to move. Okay. So that's how he's doing, Abdul. Cruising with the bishop pair. Let's check associativity. Another very strong player. Knight, knight, bishop, bishop, knight, knight, bishop, bishop, pawns, Benoni. All right, it's equal material. So equal material Benoni, that means we like white. And yeah, white's just castled. Black is going to be looking to offload one of their bad pieces, which are these three minors, are the bad pieces in the Benoni. I don't really see how to trade any of them right now, so that's not good news. Yeah, c4 seems like the best of it, Abdul. But it may be hard to back up c4 bishop here with the idea of a5 and then taking the pawn. I mean, you try like rook e8, f3. What is there? Congratulations, Sergeant Major. Congratulations. All right, but black plays rook e8. Reasonable. Very reasonable. No, I've never played e3 versus Benoni. It just looks too wimpy. And the mainline Benonis look so good. When I've had white against the Benoni Acrobatic in actual over-the-board classical games, I've always played the refutational line, right? The Taimanov, which is e4 and f4 and bishop b5 check, right? The full just try to end them. Which, as far as I've heard, is the strongest line for white, period. Like, it seemed to be considered the strongest line for white in an opening book that was written 50 years ago that I studied 20 years ago. It seemed to be considered the strongest line 20 years ago when I was playing. And it seems like even now that some supercomputers have analyzed it, I think they still think that the Taimanov is the best line. Oh, the modern h3 bishop d3? Okay. That was definitely a main line for quite a while as well. But if you get the ultimate move order where black plays a straight Benoni, you know, they don't fake a Nimzo or wait for you to play some other move order. They just straight up go knight f6, c5. Yeah, I would play the Taimanov. So e3, no, I've never really tried it. Is it e3 with or without bishop g5? e3 without bishop g5. Interesting. Yeah, I have not seen that line. Obviously, in the bishop g5 lines, white often plays e3, the early bishop g5 lines. If they're trading the dark squared bishop, they'll play e3 to defend some of the dark squares. Interesting. And yeah, queen c2 classical Nimzo is quite challenging. For a long time, that was the one line where I just did the most terrible in my sparring games as black, was against queen c2. All right. I've been standing for 2 hours, so we're going to switch. Do a little switch. And remember, folks, to switch your focal distance every now and then with your eyes. It's good to do. You know, it doesn't have to be for very long. I mean, it can be, but it's a good thing to do. All right, so white goes for full squish, right? A5 to kick this piece back, F4 to deny it anywhere to breathe. And black says, okay, well, let's just go B5 and get something going on the queen side, even if this pawn structure gets broken a little bit. At least there's some counterplay and some squares for some pieces. So I think it's a good choice from Yuan Ma, and I could see maybe this bishop living here and this knight here. I don't know if it's good or if it's necessity, but that way we keep a6 defended. And this knight restrains e5. Bishop and rook help control. And the bishop on b7 means that to play e5, white also has to make sure d5 is defended. Now that does put lots of pieces on the queen side. And so plans for white in that position could be just f5 without e5 or h4, h5. Just looking to chip away at the black king's pawn structure or pawn cover before eventually sending some more forces over there. All right, rook a3. A super fancy move, which is also often super strong. You can use that whole third rank. Do I think I still have what it takes to hit GM? You mean in theory, just having fun? If I gave up everything else in my life, put my kids in an orphanage and just hit the road of the tournament circuit, could it still be done? Or with my life as it is? How does black counter f5, the natural move? Bring a knight to e5 as fast as possible. Right? The moment f5 gets played. Instead of rook a3 already a move ago. Just like this. I think there's decent chances black could resist, Abdul. I mean, it's not to say that f5 is bad or that I'm going to refute it, but I'm not sure that I'm going to lose to it. I think I would probably still start with c4. Having the GM title would not change very much for me, no, Charlie. Right here. Right here. So I'm looking to maybe land some tactic on the E file here and keep white from fully coordinating their pieces. Yeah, I mean, if you ask what I want in my life, right? I want stuff like for my kids to be healthy and, to be able to relax a little bit and explore things they're interested in. And I'd like some time to do stuff that's fun for me now and then. And I'd like other people around the world to have those options. To have some time to read a nice book or learn to play an instrument or whatever it is they're into. So, yeah, a GM title doesn't really affect any of that. Abdul says I don't need to go queen c5. Queen c5 is simply good, Abdul. I'm really bothering white a bit with this move. I'll put a knight on e5 next, but first, I'm going to bring the queen here and get in contact with some stuff. Okay, so rook a3 got played. Queen c5, you'd play g4? Okay. Happy to see it. Happy to see it. g4. Yeah, you're done. Game over. Game over, Red Rover. Send so-and-so over. Oh, wait, I don't have enough pieces attacking d5 yet? This queen is lurking. What am I doing? Uh-oh. I blundered my stuff. Okay, well, I think we should follow their game, but I think your g4 move is bad, Abdul. Maybe I'll go here. Maybe you'd go here. No, I have 95. I'm okay against that. Here. I don't know. it's a whole other game. But I think black's going to be fine against this, honestly. I don't think you have the coordination to push this many pawns here. No worries, Kyle. I hope you enjoyed your first game, and I hope you enjoy your next one. Okay, so here's what's happening in the game. White maneuvers the queen way to the side. I guess killing this pawn, but very surprising choice. Yeah, you don't go nuts that often, Abdul, so it's fine. You should go nuts sometime. It's good for you. It's good for you to go nuts occasionally. To just lose yourself in the moment, push some pawns. As if, you own the king side and everything else. Yeah. That's how we learn stuff. If we always just play exactly the move that we would always play, it's hard to grow very much, right? You have to sometimes push your frontiers and explore some other things. Associativity is playing very calmly here. But yeah, normally taking on a6 would not even be that amazing here. Black would have some counterplay like against b2 or just against e4 or something in the resulting position. Queen c8, h3. More restraining coming in from associativity, not allowing knight g4. I didn't refute it yet, Abdul. No. I didn't have time to refute it. I didn't have time to refute it. But I was going to. If you were going to play g5 in the position after knight fd7, let's just say I would have played bishop d4. You would have probably defended your knight on e3. And then I would have played knight e5. All right. Well, B-Pole, I'm glad that you want to keep the channel family friendly. We do try to do that. We do want kids to feel comfortable. Well, kids would feel comfortable playing this tournament even if it weren't family friendly. Let's be honest. We want kids' parents to feel comfortable with their kids playing in our dojo tournaments. Sounds like you're a parent, so you know it's true. Kids don't care about G-rated language, only their parents. That's the ultimate irony, right, Dilemma? I was joking about that. I don't like the move h6 from black, I'll just say. I mean, in all this phase of posturing, the move h6 has weakened the g6 square a little bit. And that's like the most notable thing almost that's happened in the last 5 moves, actually, is that I think this h6 move was a little bit bad for black. It makes it much easier for white to create an attack on the king side at some point. Okay, knight h5, looking at these squares. Perfectly good idea from black. Yeah, it's like, why do I care if my kid hears somebody swear? But yeah. Try it and find out. Yeah, try playing g4, g5. Find out if it's good or bad. Yeah, just having fun. I think teens may curse more than any other age group, just because it's something else to explore, you know? Like Abdul trying g4, g5 plans in a position like this, right? Without developing all his pieces. I think it's natural. Teenagers are in a period of their lives of exploration, right? Does black have c4 attacking this next move? Rook a8. Finally, white plays e5, but it might be mistimed. Trade. Okay, so c4 is an option for black here. They're definitely going to be looking at it because, white's gone for it. So you might feel like you got to do something too, right? h6 is hanging and these pawns are barreling through. And you also have to watch out for this knight transferring to f6. So c4. Wow, look at that. Very quickly, associativity just over-defriends the center pawn and says, who cares about the exchange? Right on. Oh, you're playing a game right now. Well, good luck up in the top section. Good old Gramps. That may have made my day, B-Pull. Imagining your Gramps. Playing King H1 would definitely be prudent on any of those moves you were playing before, Abdul, yeah. All right, so L or I Wama with this beautiful, beautiful wave takes the exchange on a3. Now there's going to be some trouble defending the dark squares around the king. So we'll see if black can pull this off, or if white can pull this off. They're both playing something pretty controversial here. That certainly makes sense, Charlie. If you've been to a war and then you're back in a society, so to speak, you could be pretty happy to be alive. And other stuff might just not matter the same way anymore. Okay, nice idea from El Wama. It looks like they're defending dark squares towards the king side, but they're also throwing in the idea of queen c5 to get queens off the board. White's really threatening to get into these dark squares, and they look very hard to defend. But the prognosis is not so bad for the black king if we trade queens. Even though this queen's far away from the king side right now, just the fact that there are queens on the board makes everything scarier for the black king. So that's nice. Kostya Coast! Bravo! Bravo. That was a relatively quick game, Kostya. 2.5 hours? Did not expect you so fast. You must not have put every pawn on the third rank today. You must have moved the pawns up the board, rushed a little bit. E6 coming. All right, so now it's hard to play queen c5 check with your knight hanging, but your knight could actually recapture. So it is thinkable. Apparently, we had a miscommunication around two different plans. Your plan was that everyone would watch it, and my plan was that we would restart the weekend viewer tournaments, and that then we would watch your next game tomorrow. So I'm sorry that we didn't follow your plan. I wasn't really sure what to do since I couldn't discuss it with you when I got up today and realized that we had different plans. But I discussed it with Hoki, and we did what we thought was best in the end. So Queen C5. Maybe white would like take like this to gather 2 pawns and keep the passers. Very competitive endgame. Very competitive endgame that would be. In my way I'm envisioning this, white's going to take on f7 with the knight, not the pawn. So black's going to have time to go opposite colored bishops, and it's going to be weird. Okay, but in the game, black takes on e6, white grabs on g6, attacking lots of things, knight hf6. Now this feels really bad for black to me, because white can get back their exchange as they will, and this king is just open. Just open, plain and simple. It looks kind of deathly here. And I haven't even calculated pawn takes e6 yet to see whether it wins material. Oh, 3 out of 3 is a thing of beauty. There's nothing quite like winning every chess game you play. You know, many dream of it, few achieve it. Many chess players dream of going to a tournament and just winning the first game, winning the second game, winning the third game. But we don't often get to enjoy that, do we? Three minutes and 40 for white, a bare 2 minutes for black. Takes this pawn. Interesting. So the bishop's going to get tempo. That means white's going to cash back in the exchange and just maybe put a rook on e6 or something. I think that's what white has in mind here. The pawn could also take on e6. Okay, knight takes, not queen, so keeping open queen c5. But now there's queen e7, right? And that's the end. Too late. The black queen doesn't get to c5 in time. Oh! Oof. Everything is winning. Everything is mate when the king's got no pawns. Everything is winning. Hey, Michiko. Well, we'll stay for the carnage. Bishop e3. I was thinking of a very similar move, knight b5, to go here, but then I thought, well, black could play e5. Maybe we might as well take this pawn, you know? All right, so black blocks the diagonale. Knight check. Yeah, rook f1 would have also presumably done something. It'd be weird if you couldn't checkmate here as white, wouldn't it? It'd be really weird. All right, threatening queen h7. That's going to force knight f6. But which knight f6? We have to be careful about queen f7 to f8, right? still not mate, oddly. Huh. Knight G7. Huh. Somehow white is not checkmating yet. This is the weirdest not checkmate position I've seen in a while. And black's threatening queen e8, kind of. Knight e6, threatening checkmate. And keeping the queen at least off of f8. Idea is knight takes, pawn takes, and you get a tempo on the knight. And against knight f5, there was queen g5 check winning the knight. So black did trade. Now that knight is considering going to f8. Queen c6. Madness, looking for counterplay. Maybe queen g5. Noto says maybe here there was check here. Yeah, that gets the queen around this side, and you can always cut the king off with rook f1. That looks pretty good, Noto. Queen g5 defending g2. It's going to allow us to maybe take the knight next move. Yeah, we can definitely take the knight next move. Even if the king goes somewhere to play rook g8, we'll have a queen check to get out of the way, and then rook e2 or whatever, or make a new queen. So queen takes rook check and make a new queen. Yeah, so this is going to win the knight, and winning for white here after pawn takes knight. Yeah, so this all happens, and now queen here and here is the easiest thing I see, but it's not by any measure the only option. You can go queen h5, queen e5. You can even just play d8 equals queen, but queen g8 is, yeah. Rook f1 for fun. And that's the game. All right, so we see how one of our very top seeds gets it done. That was a very complicated game to fit into 15 minutes per side, right? Restraint, full board play, pressure on the A pawn, central break, exchange sack, difficult calculations. Oh my God, I was going to go look at a game in the under 1300 section now, but look at this mouth-watering matchup. I don't think I can look away from this. I don't think I can look away. All right, Mamba Green Falco. Hope you're having fun. Hope you're having fun in the tournament. And yeah, for anybody who's both watching and playing, remember that when it's your game, you should stop watching while you play a game. You can always go back to the VOD and watch later. You can always come into chat between games and ask us questions about what you're doing. Yeah? So, you know, you can ask me about a game you just played. Send me a link to it. We'll go back to it, etc. Yeah, Queen's Gambit accepted. E3 is a line to make sure that you recover it, and often to play an IQP, because black's going to be able to play c5 or e5 while you're taking back your pawn. You know, the move knight f3 is played to prevent e5 sometimes. So e3, e5, trade, straight into the IQP. There we go. A typical position for the Queen's Gambit accepted. That's right, Stamen. I didn't know how many people would show up for the tournament today because we haven't run them consistently for months while I was in Europe. So I thought, you know, if people don't know to show up at the start of the tournament and they slowly find out and trickle in, an arena would allow anybody to sort of late join and still participate. And I also didn't know how many rating sections to break it up into because I didn't know how many people to expect, right? When we've got a ton of people participating, we'll break it into 4 or 5 sections even. When you don't have as many people, then you need a bigger section so people have opponents, but then you get bigger rating mismatches. So. Yeah, of course, the plan is to keep this going consistently, Charlie, and have more and more people play. We're also going to try and get a time slot that's really consistent, and then when I have to miss a week, we're going to try and have we're going to try to have a replacement or a substitute, you know, so that we still keep the time consistent. And then we're going to use the time for other events other than just a plain view or rapid. We're going to use it for basically sparring arenas, openings, middle games, end games, and so forth. Covering positions from the Dojo training program. Right, can be opening of the week, etc. All right, so black's got room for all their pieces for now. All the black pieces come out. White plays h3 because if black gets bishop g4 in this kind of a position, the pressure against d4 is of an annoying proportion. So, h3, bishop f5. Goldsman, I'd love to see your game, but I don't know if you can post a link in chat. There's some kind of auto modding or moo modding that might stop you. Maybe you could send me the link in Discord or with a whisper. So I'm going to whisper to you, and if that pops up for you, oh, you've got block whispers from strangers. Never mind. You could try to whisper to me if you click on my name. You may be able to whisper me your link, and then I can share the game. Or you can send it to me over on Discord if you know how to find me on there. Oh, interesting. The bishop heading over to this area. I've rarely seen the bishop go there in this kind of isolated queen pawn position with the c pawn versus the e pawn. Whoops, sorry. What did it just do? Shoot. What is happening? Okay, I think I got it back. I just hit some kind of whatchamacallit shortcut that I did not know about. Messed up my window. All right, so what does white want to do? Keep the d-pawn defended or push the d-pawn? Looks like you can maybe go for a push here as white. Looks like there's a lot of latitude to choose. If you want to go d5, maybe you want to avoid bishop takes c3. Maybe you would want to go b4 here, d5, knight here. See, if bishop takes c3, this pawn would now be kind of exposed, right? Here, here, and then like this. So you can support the pawn pretty well. Or maybe throw in bishop g5 because black can't just play h6. And then go here. All right. Hope you had fun, Kiderna. And have a great evening. So that's one option for white. I would say perfectly acceptable. Another option is the one which was just played, which is bishop g5, just developing more pieces. And a third one that I would have thought could maybe be okay is sometimes just defend this, and then develop pieces. Yeah, absolutely. We want to see your checkmate. Copy link. All right. So we're going to back up a few moves to see the setup as well. So we've got what looks like a queen pawn game, maybe a London actually, because nobody played c4 or c5 and the bishops aren't inside the pawn chain. So maybe a London. The knights are going to be good pieces in this locked structure. Goldsman B wins a pawn on e4. And Petacek tries to take advantage of Goldman not being castled, breaking in the center with this e-pawn push, going after the knight and the king. Good move. Queen c2. Petacek takes, getting ready to put real pressure on this file here with rook e8. But, knight f6 check. Goldsman has learned some checkmate patterns and deploys one. Boom! Knight f6 check. What is it called? Clearance, right? Clearance, opening the diagonal for the queen, clearing the diagonal of your own piece that was blocking it. And however you take on f6, it's mate. Boom. So actually, with queen c2, white's threatening knight f6 and this checkmate pattern, and black could not take on d4 here. They had to play a defensive move of some kind, h6 or f5 or something like that. Yeah, there was no defender in this case, right? It was just it's just clearance, I think, because we're clearing the way for our own piece. Congrats, Goldman. Good work. And you've got the United Kingdom flag. Earlier today we had England against Ireland. Here we have the United Kingdom. Interesting. So there's both a UK flag and an England flag. Huh, I don't even know. Like, if you live in England, which one I guess you could choose either? Huh. Okay, let me see. Is this our game over here? Okay, so we have bishop g5, h6, and retreats. Okay, so keeping that tension. This makes a lot of sense because the bishop is not there to defend this diagonal, as usual, right? And the bishop d6 can also be annoying against this bishop because you could go g5, bishop g3, and get traded on g3 as well. So with the bishop out here, it does make sense that this bishop could find some use over on the king side, for sure. But, I mean, I did also have the question, if black goes after d4 and we can't defend it with the bishop, I guess Associativity was planning, then they were going to push. Then they would push. So, Blunderfest makes the trade on c3. You'd expect white to recapture, but white could play bishop f6 because I think Blunderfest's plan is g5 and knight e4. So Associativity is going to evaluate that. Is going to evaluate how they feel about that g5 idea. And if the g5 idea looks really good, then they could throw in bishop f6 check, hitting the queen, and then recapture. And it's about equal. But they just took back, so they allowed g5, and Blunderfest blitzes out rook e8, so g5 was not the plan. Abdul or anyone else who was watching, how much time did Blunderfest have at the end of the last game? The one with the bishop pair? Checkmate? $14:30. It was a ton of time, right? Thanks, people. All the time. Yeah. But if you look at the time usage here, even though rook e2 came out really fast, I'm realizing that Blunderfest is spending a lot more time on this game, right? 5 minutes out of 15 just on the opening, right? Just bringing out the pieces to reasonable squares. So what does this tell you, folks? What does this tell you about Blunderfest? 30 seconds used last round, 5 minutes in the opening this round. What do you think's happening? I mean, there's no way Blunder could have memorized all the lines to an endgame last game, right? Winning positions are usually easier to play, but presumably Blunderfest didn't have a winning position during the first 10 moves of last game either, right? Time usage from Merles means that he doesn't like his position. He thinks he has a bad position, maybe, yeah. You think he's got a bad position out of this opening, Abdul? This queen b3 move is potentially a problem, and we see him tanking now. But up till a move ago, I thought he had a pretty standard position. Right? All right, I'm going to tell you guys what I think, and I don't intend or for this to be seen as a criticism or anything to make Blunderfest feel bad. But I think Blunderfest might have used very little time last round because the opponent was lower rated, and a lot of time this round because the opponent is equally rated, aka very highly rated, like Blunderfest. And it's a very, very natural thing for people to do, to play looser or more relaxed when they think that they are the better player, right? And then to play slower and more nervously when they think the opponent might be a very strong player. Does that make sense? Now, basically, this is playing loose against people you think are weaker than you is kind of a bad habit that can develop. And it's one of the reasons why it's tough to consistently be the highest rated player in any particular group or pool of players, right? So for example, when I was running a brick and mortar chess club, I would play millions of games against anybody who came into the club, right? I was trying to be like a host and encouraging and sharing and so forth, right? So I would play and play and play just thousands of games against lower rated players, and then I would develop this bad habit of playing loosely because, you know, a beginner walks in, they're going to be hanging pieces, right? And you know, that's just normal. And then I would go to my tournaments and, you know, it would be a problem for me. So Blunderfest, you know, does a nice service to all of us by being one of the highest rated players, you know, and playing here in tournaments consistently against people lower rated than them. Does a nice service. There is a little bit of a toll or a cost to that. All right, they found a very good solution to this difficult position here. 2.5 minutes of thought, but there's this kind of threat, there's this kind of threat. Knight a5 doesn't work because check here, trying to win the bishop. Queen b5 hits all your undefended pieces, or queen b4. So it was a tough situation. I think Merle's found like a perfect solution here. Here, if queen b7, there's knight a5. Pop, pop. We've also removed the hanging piece from f5, so less tactics are going to work against us. More tactics will work for us. And then after bishop e6, rook e6 is in the game. If queen b7, I think black may even save this with rook b8, queen here, knight takes d4. And black again seems to more or less save the game. You know, so associativity tried to keep the pressure on by just going for the e file while this rook's on a8, and Merle's is going to have to pay some kind of defensive tempo or something eventually for this b7 pawn. So white's keeping like a little pull maybe with this rook e1 move. Smurfette, I think, or somebody asked this question. If Merle's played a simul against the three senseis, would they win all the games? I don't think so. I mean, they're certainly good, but Jesse and Kostya are really good too. And playing a simul's not that easy. Okay, Abdul has the same evaluation as me. Thinks white is still just a little bit naggingly better. Merle's has now paid the tempo for the b7 attack. There's this little pressure along this diagonal restricting some of what you can do. Queen d6 is probably the desirable next move. G5 to resolve the pin is always going to be an option, but also a dramatic option with some repercussions to the king becoming weaker. There is a question of what white could do to improve things at this point. Maybe queen c4. Oh, a move has been played. Let's see what it was. It was knight e5. Okay, straight at the thing. Threat on f7, threat on c6, kind of trying to force the knight trade, then play de and immediately use that pin to do something on the king's side. Oh, it looks very strong. But is there a saving queen d5 move? Oh, it's hard to say. Knight e5, de5, queen d5, right? And the knight can escape if you trade. So then you're playing c4, Queen here hitting this piece. Oh, they're going down this line. Blunderfest has found queen d5 as the solution. So knight e5, knight e5, d5, queen d5, c4. c4 has been played. Queen d4 hitting this piece. Then maybe you take on f6 with the bishop. Ooh, queen a5. Not queen d4. I don't know if there was something wrong with queen d4. Maybe this move's just as good or better. Let me just show... Let's just look for a second at the alternative here to knight e5, because this was such a critical moment. I was thinking queen c4, and if queen d6, I would then trade with the idea of going after the c7 pawn. But maybe black would just go straight to knight a5. And maybe I can't make any use of this. Queen g3 was winning a coconut in the line that I was looking at before, Abdul. Yes, so this sort of stops my queen c4 idea. Knight a5. Yeah, I've achieved nothing here. Okay, so let's look at what associativity picked. Boom, 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 boom. So Abdul is saying against queen d4, this line here that I was thinking, check here, check. I was thinking maybe king h7. And Abdul says takes and queen c7 would be the coconut. Yep. I had an instinct to try and look for something here. You know, I thought maybe queen f3 was also on my radar as a move. If the king was on h8, maybe something different. But I hadn't yet calculated anything past here with any assurance. It looks like e takes f6 does cleanly capture a pawn. There's a checkmate threat here. So you probably come back and this happens. And white's up a pawn nicely. So that probably explains queen a5. Now after considerable thought, we get queen e3. Gunning for e6 after the knight moves. You're not going to have to wait long. He's going to play e6 quickly because he spent 2 minutes on queen e3. He, she, they. I don't know associativity. Associativity is, I think, playing e6 here and wanted to take on e6 with the queen, not the rook. I think that's why queen e3 was played here versus a rook lift, right? You could have gone rook e2 or rook e3 here as white. Were both reasonable moves, and the knight would retreat, and then you could play e6 if you wanted to. Rook d1. So since the knight didn't go to d7, if the knight goes to d7, you get e6 with tempo, they have to take it. If the knight goes to e8, then it can't defend d7. If it had gone to d7, it could go to c5. But there is queen a4, and what's the plan? White was threatening c5. Blunderfest blocks it with c5 themselves. Rook g4 threatening queen h6 and bishop f6. What was Merle's idea after e6? I'm not sure, Abdul. I mean, white's just better, right? So e6 would have been good for white. I don't know, maybe Merle's would come here and bring the queen here. And you know, there's still mild suffering, but nothing decisive has happened to black just yet. mean, I don't know for sure. White might not even take on f7, right? Might go for something like this, trying to keep more pieces on the board, keep black a little discoordinated. E6 again, you're saying. Okay, where? In this position, the rook was hanging, so white had to move it. Then white's rook was hanging, had to move it. So now against queen h6, there's queen g4. I guess queen h6 was never threatened because there was always queen d1 to g4. Against bishop f6, not sure of the defense to that. And then, of course, there's still e6. So white's got two moves that look really powerful. I think this one threatens rook g7, knight g7, queen g3. I think that's sort of the formal threat. Maybe also bishop takes, knight takes, queen here. Especially if like the king moves somewhere. Like if the king moves, there may be multiple options, but you might do something like this. So the knight still gets trapped. But Abdul, you're wondering about e6 here maybe? It looks good. There's queen d6. I had thought of in some position. Yeah, here there's queen d6, right? Yeah. No, I'd seen this before. I was just trying to wonder when you wanted e6. You wanted it right after knight e8, yeah. Knight e8, e6, queen f5, I think. Maybe other moves too. But at least this. Don't worry, Abdul. I'd seen the queen d6 idea. All right, bishop f6. Looks strong. King h7, trying to keep the queen out. Yeah. There might be like bishop g7, knight g7, queen check, king moves, rook takes g7, king g7, queen g4 check, and queen takes c8. Winning one pawn. Queen e4 played. With this move order, black has the option of g6, but e6, knight f6. I don't know. Okay, goes for g6. What do you think of the pawn winning variation that I mentioned? You take, knight takes, give check. King here takes. Doesn't look like there's millions of options that I'm missing, right? Like this move you can take, and they're still in check. King here, you take. You're threatening mate. Kind of has to take. Oh, there's no queen g4. That's what's wrong with my line. Okay. So my line didn't work at all. Queen e4 was associativity's choice. g6. Queen comes in, gets shut out. It's amazing how long he stayed alive with this knight on e8, huh? Astonishing. Hey, Broken Record, welcome in. There's another 40 minutes or so you can definitely get in a game if you'd like to join one of the arenas. Same holds for anyone else who's just popping in. Who is this tournament for? You might have wondered and not asked. For you. The tournament was for you. Queen a8. I think this is the move. Is there any chance there's knight f6 takes queen d6, but Merles doesn't go for it, so presumably there was not. What was wrong with that, though? Knight takes. Okay, you have to. Threatening knight takes rook, too. Seems like they hung a pawn and didn't take it. Getting a little bit low on time. Okay, other question. Let's ask another question back here. Here, here, check, here, here. Turning this, and this, and this. This sacrifice looks rather promising, actually. Unless Black actually plays King G8, getting pinned on purpose to defend this square. Wow. Okay, back to the game. Which is still remaining quite tense. The knight is pretty bad still. And if it tries to get out at g7, there will always be g4. Maybe then it could get to e6. So you could try to eventually bring this knight through e6. Black could. Associativity retreats the bishop to passivity. Seems like Black should be able to get out a dodge now. Huh. And here it comes. The knight gets out. And Black's got the D file. So this thing can turn around completely. Yeah, Black's better now, right? They've got the D file. And the white bishop is no longer looking so hot. I think it should have stayed on f6. I don't know why it retreated, but I would imagine that it should have always stayed on f6. You know, it always bottles in the black king, so there's always mates. If Black ever trades it, you put a pawn on f6, which is still a concern for the black king position. Yeah, I don't think the bishop has any other role in the game other than here. After this game, folks, we're going to go look at a game from the lowest rated section or games that I can find, really, because we've looked at two of our highest rated players in a row here. With low time, the battle continues to rage. And you'll see Blunderfest not even trading the bishop on g3 at the cost of hurting white's structure. Blunderfest is really saying this bishop is so bad now that I can just outplay it with the knight. But that's going to force g5. That's a concession. The bishop refound its purpose. So white's going to want to poke at this king for sure if they get the chance, you know. The knight heads off, and here comes the f-pawn. We're going to have to sack the c-pawn and attack here. But knight f1 wins the bishop instead of the c-pawn, right? Maybe the rook needed to go to e1. Does knight f1 not clean house here? Wow, neither of them does it. They go for the coconut. I don't know. Knight f1 looked like a full piece. No? Am I blundering things? Rook f2, looking to get into f6. The black king is definitely airy. Blunderfest only has a couple seconds to play out this game. Knight gets in position for checkmates and knight f1, so queen d5 is in the future, or queen c6. Something like that. But whenever you move the queen, you have to watch out for e6, that's for sure. What does white do? Aims at a queen trade, potentially. Now we're going to get that queen trade. Knight defends the b6 pawn too. Holy moly. Then he immediately gives the pawn here. What? I thought the point was to defend the pawn. This could have made sense, maybe as well. I mean, they're just so low on time. We can hardly see the moves. They can probably hardly see them either. White's rook gets active. Does he have time to take the a-pawn before getting behind? He decides to just get behind. There goes the pawn. Maybe bishop e1, rook d1, bishop b4, c1 equals queen, rook c1, bishop a5. That should be a draw, I think, that exchange sack. We'll see. Takes it. Takes on a7. Rook to a1 or c4. The bishop can go to d8. Rook a1. You can also play e6 here, maybe? e6, rook a4, e7. Oh, he just goes to d2. Yeah, it's a draw. Wow, that was epic. Seemed like Merles was winning for some phase, you know, not just the knight f1 check tactic, but even after the queen trade, it was probably a winning endgame. But, you know, somehow, you know, he pushed the c-pawn and didn't quite get enough out of it. All right. Draw agreed. Epic. Epic. All right. I just want to know if I'm crazy or not. Does knight f1 not win? Knight f1 check. No pieces defending it. I lost it. Lost the board. I think you missed knight f1 in that position, Merles. As far as I could see. That was the one thing I noticed. I also think your opponent was better for most of the game. So, as long as their bishop was on f6. Before they retreated it, I think you were always worse. But not like lost worse, you know, just like a little bit of, you know, a little bit of torture, a little bit of worry. But then when you got your knight out to g7 and f5, I saw you got very confident. Find the section here. All right. See what games we got going Pita Czech here is in first place in the under 1300 arena right now. So let's watch their game. Let's watch their game. Okay, so what opening is this? It looks like maybe a French where white took on f6. Let's see. Yeah, French with taking on f6. So in theory, black should be fine at this point here, right? Because basically white released a fair amount of tension with bishop takes c6, where black didn't spend a move on a6 or queen b6 or something to force the trade, right? And e takes f6, allowing the black knight to develop, right? When you play a move like e5, you're spending time to gain space. And when you play a move like e takes f6, all that time disappears into nothingness. You know what I mean? And so black is sort of catching up on development here, it seems like. So heading into this game, we would think that, you know, black's doing fine. Nothing terrible's happened in the opening for them. Isn't trading the light squared bishop strategically bad? There's a lot of exceptions to that viral stigma, but often it's a little bit bad. Yeah. But let's moderate the whole statement, right? The bishop on d3 can be our best piece in like a c3, d4 kind of pawn structure, right? So that's why trading it might be strategically bad, right? It could be a really important piece, and if you trade it, the light squares that you might be kind of weak for white, right? Because you don't have a pawn structure on light squares and you don't have a bishop on light squares to cover those squares. So certainly it could be bad to trade the bishop for those reasons. Also, you know, bishops are often a little bit better than knights. A lot of the exceptions, though, come from the fact that in the French, often these two squares on d4 and e5 are really, really critical. So there are positions where white will trade on c6 in order to have control over those squares. Sometimes having a nice control of those two squares can trump the question of the bishop, and black's bishop can end up being bad because of their pawn structure on light squares, and they're not able to move those pawns off of light squares if white has really good control of the dark squares, right, to blockade and restrain them. So that's why it can be a little bit more complicated than that. See, you see here black trying to break out the bishop, but they're doing it with what looks like a pawn sack and tactics, and it's very complicated. Very complicated. Goldman playing too fast, right? 14:53 out of 15 minutes left. Pita Czech has spent 2 minutes. So playing too quickly, you can't be playing, you know, game-deciding tactics like e5 and rook e8, trying to win the game without thinking a little bit more about them. Queen e7. So we've got a whole calculation going on the e file. The question is, black's trying to win this piece by attacking it a bunch with the idea that if the bishop moves, right, if it captures one of these pieces, that black's going to have a win down the e file. And white is looking to either defend the bishop enough or find a moment where you can land some kind of tactic by surprise where you move the bishop and don't lose down the e file. At the moment, after queen e7, it looks like the bishop can't move because queen takes e2 looks winning. And I don't see another way for white to defend that bishop. I think maybe the decisive thing here was that when black played e5, white should take with the knight, so that the f pawn is free. And then if black attacks you along the e file, you can play f4 and hold the piece more or less. Oh, but maybe the concern was c5. I mean, I don't know how much they're playing a little bit fast, so I don't know how much they looked at it. But maybe the concern with knight e5 was that c5 would remove the defender. How do we handle the knight and the bishop that are both getting threatened here? That looks winning for black. And if that's winning for black, then the move e5 was just brilliant. Except when you only think for 2 or 3 seconds, how can you play a move that's brilliant? How does that happen? See, in the game, black's take... Oh, and white repins. See? Okay, I can't defend e5 anymore, but I get castled. And now I go like this with the idea that if this bishop moves, white's going to win material back, just like that. Okay. So, question to Goldsman and to everybody else watching. Does black have a way out of white's threat? The same threat that black was using before that white couldn't defend. Does black have a resource to defend against this? All right, some people in chat want to play knight d7. Bishop h2 is what I would have played, and that's Goldsman's pick. It's check, so white doesn't have time to take the queen, and black's going to take the queen next move. Boom! And now black's got a dramatic material advantage after finding all those tactics. So a game can be over in 1 or 2 minutes if you enter a jungle of trades, captures, pins, hidden attacks, etc. And either player plays quickly or just has a little lapse. A game can be over like that. I think it's really important when you start getting into, if you can recognize that you're getting into really sharp parts of the game, really important to recognize, oh my gosh, the moment's becoming really important, really critical, really sharp, and then try to calculate a bit. Because right now, an endgame with an extra rook, you would expect black to win the game more than 90% of the time. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. They should have been very careful when the moment got crazy like that. Rook takes f2, knight takes c6, rook takes b2. Yeah, I mean, rooks love to be on the second rank, right? They're sometimes called pigs, right? Because it's like they're at the trough, right? And they're just gobbling pawns here and there. Pigs on the second or seventh. And that black rook is showing us why, as it collects 2 pawns. P to check shows you the origin of their name, giving check to the black king. Yeah, the Farmers and the Piggies game, Hockey Chess Dude, is a good introductory sort of chess-like game for kids. Viral Stigma likes this idea of playing rook f1. Instead of gobbling pawns, try and keep the white pieces trapped like this. And yeah, I agree with you, Stigma. That's a very, very effective technique. When your opponent's pieces can't move, chess is so much easier. When their pieces can move, they can surprise you. They can make threats. You can be like, oh, wait, where did that come from? It can be really unpleasant sometimes, honestly. So, yeah, anytime you can immobilize multiple of your opponent's pieces, I love to do that. It just really reduces the stress and the chances of unpleasant surprises coming to perturb us. All right. King comes up, encouraged by some checks from the knight. And yeah, taking the pawn is fine too. This is just another option. That one suggested there. Let me just check the standings in some of the other sections. I'm curious. Let's see what the standings are in the 13 to 1700 section. Wow, we had 13 and 12 points, each with 5 chess points. So basically a tie between Noel Brown and Skibix in the 13 to 1700 section. Excellent. Okay, rook e2. So knight chased the rook. The rook found a square for now. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, what a square it found. Whew! If white had found knight f4 there, I would have had to do some squats. That would have been some squats. All right. Hanging pieces on this row, so the rook's going to be happy here now. Whew. Exactly, knight f4. That's like the kind of surprise that, can wreck somebody's day, right? That's what I mean with I don't like it when my opponent's pieces can move, right? I'm trying to find a square. I'm trying to organize my stuff, and then bam, and it's often the knight, because I historically have been less good at seeing how knights move, and I think I'm not alone in that. I think for a lot of people it's the knight, but not necessarily. Everybody has their own little blind spots, but then like boom, suddenly their knight like appears on a square I didn't anticipate, and then they've got the initiative and some threats, and it's just hellish, much better when your opponent can't move. All right, white tries to hold the material on the third rank with rook d1. That makes sense. See what black's going to do. Risky having the king out here in the line of fire of the knights, and yeah, this rook still needs to be brought out as well. So kind of two things for black to do. Be careful with the king and finish developing. Well, there's always a million things to do, but it's kind of like chess is a priority list, right? In theory, you'd like to develop all your pieces, achieve certain positional advantages, take control of the files, eat all your opponent's weak pawns, advance your majorities. There's, the list of what a chess player wants to do is super long, but normally we're just focused on the top couple priorities, right? Like I need to finish development, or I need to get my king to safety, or I need to take control of this open file, or I need to open up the position around my opponent's king, so I have to arrange like a pawn trade there. Normally there's like one or two things that are really up near the top that we're working on. All right, the knights continue to harass the rook, and I see squat potential here. I see things that could go wrong. Knights are so tricky and annoying. They cover so many squares when a king is around. It like doubles the squares they cover. You know, because they're covering every square they're attacking, but they can also hop and hit the king and other squares. So they go from covering 8 squares to 16. If you think about that, right? If you think that this knight is covering all the 8 squares of knight d4 plus all the 8 squares of knight c2, it's stronger than a rook in terms of how much it's covering in terms of absolute squares. And compared to a queen in most positions where some angles are blocked by other pieces, it's actually going to be covering more squares than a queen, which is crazy. Rook e4, okay. I was worried, right? The natural thing is to come down to the second rank and counterattack. But Goldman was using some time and paying some attention and saw this possibility. Rook e4, good job. I think, Buck Duck, that after the arena time runs out, the arena scores are set at that point and won't be updated beyond that. I don't know if you're able to play out a game that's still in progress with it not counting for the arena, but at least get to play it out. Or if they just stop all games. I don't know if it was on chess.com or Lichess, but somewhere I had the experience where I was playing a game and an arena ended and it just sort of aborted the game or something. Like the game, like I couldn't finish playing out the game. Whereas me, if I were coding it, I think I would code it so you could finish your games, but they just wouldn't count for arena points. But you could still play your game. Okay, Abdul saying on chess.com you get aborted, and Buckduck says on Lichess you get to play on it. It doesn't count for the arena. Okay, it's good to know. That's I would code it the Lichess way. But I don't know what the logic or the reasoning is for the chess.com way, if there is any. I mean, it could be an omission or it could be a deliberate choice. Rook takes d4 is a very practical choice here, Stigma. Yeah. Rook e3 is the move that was played, but if you see this, it's losing material, but you're ahead and it takes away so much of your opponent's material. It's a very reasonable, practical choice to make. Perfectly good to go for this as black if you want to. And if you're confident that you're not going to get forked by the knights, of course, then keep playing like Goldsman is doing here, right? Just attack this, attack this. Yeah, the auto abort or apparently resignation threats are pretty annoying. Doesn't seem right. Knight b2. Looks like Goldsman's done a really good job of developing the rook, coordinating the pieces, and going after a weakness with them. And the pawn gets taken. I would have probably taken with the other rook. Maybe I'm blundering a tactic or something, but my instinct is to take with this rook so that my rooks cover 2 different files and the white rook can't steal a file from me. But sometimes you want doubled rooks in order to be able to bring a rook down supported by something if you're trying to get into another square. Depends. This knight's annoyingly covering the penetration, though, so we'll see what black can do from here to make more progress. Even with an extra rook, it's not obvious how to make progress. Knights are just covering so many squares. I mean, what would I even do here as black? I mean, I could maybe go after the A pawn with rook A3 to A2. Seems a little grubby. Interesting. Rook B8. Okay, going after that knight. It's going to have to reposition. Agreed, viral stigma. It seems so obvious. It seems so obvious. Knight B3. Interesting. I expected knight D3, just saying like, yep, I will, reposition. But knight B3. Okay. Just because I don't feel like the knight on B2 is so amazing or critical, like I don't know why white would really want to, why white would be averse to repositioning it, but knight b3, sort of keeping the spot for now. I guess now my concern for white would be maybe rook c2. Like I think the knight on d4 was really doing something important there, covering the second rank. Does rook c2 blunder any knight forks? We have to be fairly careful. Rook c2. Yeah, no knight forks. A5. Okay, really going after the knights here. Yeah, RKJW. Hans has organized a series of really serious matches against really strong opponents, and he's torn through them. 3 matches in a row. So I don't know exactly how he got those opponents to agree to play with him, but they might be regretting. They might be regretting it. Normally, a player like Anish, how do you get a match against Anish? Normally a player like Anish is just in round robins, very, very slowly bleeding his rating points, like at the Sinkfield Cup right now with a lot of draws. But oh my gosh, there it goes. Oh wait, that was a loose piece. That's 5 squats, and that's a loose piece. That's 5 squats. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Not good news for PETA, but I hadn't gotten enough exercise today. Honestly, people were just not really hanging pieces today. Yeah, maybe PETA knew. Maybe PETA said, I can't defend this anymore. Let's give David some squats to do. Now they're trying for a stalemate, right? By trying to get rid of the last pawn, but checkmate. The death of your king ends the game. As said by Apathy in the song Checkmate. I think that's what it's called. Good name for a song. All right. Okay, we got a game here between Baemon and SB Thorson. There's only a few minutes left in this arena, so these are going to be some of the last games. This is an end game with an extra pawn for SB. Five against 6. And SB goes after the H pawn, trying to go up 2 pawns here. They have the exact same amount of time, 344 to 344. D5. Baemon is suddenly playing super fast. I would have thought rook e2. would be the best move here, going after this thing. And what you'll see is you can kind of keep harassing black. It looks like the h-pawn's dead as a doornail. And maybe that's what Baymon assumed, is like the h-pawn's just dead. The rook's behind it. My pieces are on the queen side. But you can actually harass your opponent's weaknesses quite effectively with a rook. And what you'll see is the king defends, you check the king, right? If the king goes this way, you go back to attack the e-pawn. If the king goes this way, you go attack the g-pawn. And I don't know that black can cover everything, right? This is a very typical theme from rook and pawn endings. If you imagine the knight and bishop not participating for a moment, right? And at the moment, they don't really affect g7 or e6 very much, right? So if you imagine those pieces not really affecting things, this is a very, very common theme where a rook like harasses a king and sort of just repeats, and normally it forces a pawn trade. It's very common, and it very commonly works, basically, that your opponent can't just have their way. Very hard for the king to cover pawns on split files like this in a rook endgame. That's kind of a pure rook endgame theme coming through there. Okay, so d5 was played. I think this move's going to be pretty bad. I think it's going to drop another pawn on d5. I don't see the benefit. There goes that pawn. There goes that pawn. And yeah, now black has 3 extra pawns instead of 1. So the advantage has just ballooned for SB right there. So the d5 was some kind of desperation, but the wrong kind of desperation, right? The wrong desperation that time. Okay, sorry. What are people saying in chess? I think it's probably not worth trying to start another game now, right? I don't want my game to be bored in the middle. Yeah, I agree, Hokey Gamer. The arenas have something like 10 minutes left, and it's 15 minutes each as the time control. So I don't think there's too much point in starting a new game at this point. It's just time for people to run out the games that they already have open. Here comes a passed pawn, headed home quite quickly from SB there. The H-pawn hustling. Now, where to put the king? Oh, he doesn't even put the king. I was thinking tuck the king on H7, but yeah, rook F8 is an interesting possibility here. Rook C2, stopping the pawn at least. Good scramble from Baymon. Now, I mean, 3 extra pawns you should eventually win, but how do you win? That's what's interesting to ask in a position like this. That seems like a joke. That's impossible. Are you being serious? Do you have a real source for that, RKJW? Chess boxing in the Olympics? Chess boxing is like a mashup. That's a mashup with almost no history and almost no people who play it, right? Like worldwide, you have whatever, 500 million chess players, and you've got something like 50 chess boxers in the whole world. There was a Paris Olympics exhibition with chess boxing? Rook F5. Okay, so the black rook is activating, trying to help that pawn. Good work by black, getting that pawn defended and supported enough. Excellent. That happened really fast, so I didn't get to fully explain it, and I was distracted by this chess boxing thing, which is really distracting. But okay, like right here, white's going to come with rook h2, so you have to prepare to, at minimum, defend this pawn. But this pawn, ideally, you would put this pawn on g4. Second, ideally, you'd put your king next to the pawn, because kings are really good at supporting passed pawns. Black doesn't have those options. The knight's cut off by the bishop. So the minimum is to at least be aware that you need to play rook f3 to not lose your pawn. You really don't want to just lose your pawn, right? But rook f5 hitting the bishop, that was brilliant because that gets squares for the knight. This move was just so nice from Thorson. Hitting this and finding space for the knight. You challenge the bishop because it's bothering you, but it's not supported. Then the knight can get into the game, right? And if the bishop went somewhere else, and black has won the game, as they should after the way they started that, after the technique they showed there, right? But I just want to say, if the bishop ran away somewhere, black can push through h2 because the knight's defending it. So white played this to keep the pawn blockaded, at least, so it doesn't queen. But then you trade on h2, and now it's clean. The g-pawn just came, right? And that's clear that black wins with this. So that's probably the last game we have here. And that, I think that should be kind of the end of the arenas. There's 5 minutes left, but why start a 30-minute game? Because 15 plus 15 is 30, right? Why start a 30-minute game when there's 5 minutes to go? Breakdancing is great. What Australia did was unethical. I don't know what happened there. All right, so congratulations to Noel Brown on winning an arena. I don't know how much this event is about winning it, but I think all these events do give points towards the Dojo Liga. So congrats to Noel Brown. Congrats also to Skibix on second place. And let's check the other tournaments as well. Underwater chess, that sounds good. But that's because I'm a swimmer, not a boxer. All right, who won the under 1300 one? It was Pitacek. Yes. And 1700. 1700 plus. Looks like Blunderfest has a 4-point lead, and Associativity still has a game going on. But I'm having trouble opening the game. Okay, I got it open. Phew. All right. Soren BT might be the same as SB Thorson. Just a change in which name gets initialed. Good game, Soren. Very nice technique there at the end of the end game with Baymon that we got to watch here. What's going on in this position here, since we have one last game that probably won't finish? Knight and two bishops against knight and two bishops. Pawns are equal. The black king's a little bit weirdly placed, but it looks like that's not going to necessarily be a decisive factor here. Abdul, you want to see what happened in the last few moves? Let's see. Queen's Gambit accepted. The queen trade variation. Calm stuff. Black king gets a little bit bothered by bishop a3. Yeah, black's coordination looks a little suspect at this phase here. White sacks the e-pawn. We don't know if that's on purpose or not. But yeah, that's how we got here. Bishop b5. If you wanted to trade bishops, I think bishop c6 is also a very, very likely way to get a bishop trade. I think you would see bishop f3 from white then. And honestly, I would recommend just, developing a rook as well. Bishop b5. So we get the bishop trade. Black takes the doubled pawns, which is fine because the a pawn is going to need defending. So that's perfectly fine to play a takes b. And yeah, I mean, the thing that could be dangerous for black would be a white rook getting to the d file here. White pokes the bishop. I was expecting rook d1. Well, now rook d1 looks good as well. Rook e2. And the game gets aborted as the arena ends. So that's the end of the arena. It didn't look like Associativity was in the obvious position to win that game, and I don't know how many points you can get for winning a game, but Blunderfest gets 14 points and wins the arena here. They had a great game between each other, which ended in a draw. And honestly, Associativity won all 3 of their other games, so great play by them. Third place to Kurokuru 732. And that's a wrap on this, folks. In terms of what's coming up next, in terms of streaming, we're going to have Kostya's 4th round game tomorrow morning, my time. Afternoon, evening in Portugal. I think it's a 4 p.m. start time in Portugal tomorrow for round 4. And I'll stream commentary a few minutes late. I'm going to be dropping off the kids. There's a little game delay on the relay, but we'll pick up the round for Kostya and the Chess Nerd tomorrow morning, and we'll have Kostya games Monday, Tuesday, etc. And next Friday we'll have the Classical Arena again for viewers, and next weekend we'll also have a viewer arena on either Saturday or Sunday at this time. I have not yet figured out for sure if it's Saturday or Sunday, so we will see when it will be during the week. So look out for an announcement about when that is, and hopefully many of you can play. I hope that everybody who played enjoyed themselves, and the same for those who watched. If you've got any questions or feedback or anything, let me know. And yeah, we'll try to make good use of our time together. Take care, everybody. Have a good day. And let's send off a raid somewhere.